Hey guys, it's Ashton here. So you are looking to buy an apartment here in New York City and you realize you really only have one of two choices, either a condo or a cooperative. We call it co-op for short. The only other option you really have is a townhouse if you are looking to drop a ton of money. You may have heard some cautionary tales about buying a co-op in New York City and really that you just shouldn't and that you should only stick to a condo. So my goal today is to discuss both options, discuss the pros and cons of each, and then help you make a decision moving forward on which is better for you. But before diving into the details of a co-op and a condo, really the most important thing that you can do is make sure you give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, as it really helps out my channel. So let's just start by describing what a co-op is to begin with. A co-op, which is short for cooperative, is a common type of ownership here in New York City. These are essentially corporations with a board, and ownership is similar to owning shares in a company. Each apartment is valued in shares, and taking ownership involves meeting with a board of the cooperative for approval. Now let's talk about co-op qualifications. You will need a full financial statement with asset verification, personal and professional references, employment verification, pro forma information. You might need 2+ years of tax returns, and if they ask you what you had for breakfast, what you had for dinner, what did you do last night, where did you go to school, whatever they may ask you, you have to answer them and give them all that information. Now, while the application may seem very rigorous, it ensures a very strong community within the building, which should be important to you. Now, let's talk about a condo. As many of you may already be familiar with them, they are a bit different than a co-op. Each unit has its own block and lot number. The government views this as real property. You pay individual taxes and separate common charges. Ownership allows for more flexibility, such as buying in an LLC or a trust or through a corporation. And condos also allow subletting from day one. As you peruse your buying options, you'll probably notice that condos tend to command higher prices than co-ops, even when they're on the very same block. This really reflects their ease of ownership and transfer. So now that we know what a co-op is and what a condo is, let's talk about the key differences between each. And let's start off with ownership. Condo ownership is deeded property and you will receive a title, so you have ownership of the apartment itself as well as a percentage of the common areas. And co-ops involve owning shares in a corporation in which you will receive a proprietary stock and lease certificate once you purchase it. This is not deeded property, so you will not receive a title afterwards. Now, co-ops may limit certain buyer profiles, such as a pied-à-terre buyer or someone who will be using it to let their kids live in it or as an investment property, because they really want to have that sense of community. Because when you think about it, generally primary users will take better care of not only the apartment but the building itself, and that's really what a co-op is looking for. With condos though, there's a lot more flexibility, as you will have pied-à-terre buyers, foreign investors, you will have people buying for their children. There's just many different ways to go about purchasing it and taking ownership of the apartment. So now let's talk about the application and interview process for each. With a co-op, you will be putting together a very thorough board application that has to look pristine to go to the board, and the goal is to make sure that once they review that package, they don't have any extra questions for you. Once they approve the package, they will then request to interview you. And again, the goal here is to really get a sense of who you are and get to know you before you potentially purchase into their community. Now for condos, there is an application that you must put together for the building, but there is not an interview that you have to go through. So it's a little bit easier to get through it all. Now, when it comes to the approval process itself, unfortunately, co-ops have the right to deny a purchase and they don't even have to give you a reason. It has happened, unfortunately, but that is why it's good to work with a good agent that can help you make sure you put together a really pristine board package so that the board has no reason to deny you in the first place. Now, when it comes to a condo, that will generally be smooth sailing. There is really most likely not going to be a denial that happens. The only reason a denial would happen is if the condo board decides to step in and put in place their right of first refusal. Now, you may be asking, Ashton, what is a right of first refusal? Well, what that is when a condo board steps in, they decide to deny a purchase, and then they have to then agree to buy the apartment from the seller at the same terms they agreed upon with the original buyer. The reason they have this in place is so that, let's say an apartment is normally worth $1 million. Let's say Johnny owns the apartment and he is wanting to sell it to his cousin Vinny for $50,000. Now, that would really harm the building if that purchase were to go through, because then it would bring down the value of a lot of other apartments in the building, and obviously the condo doesn't doesn't want that to happen. So what they would do is turn down that purchase. They would buy the apartment and then put it back on the market for market value, sell the apartment, and then take the proceeds to put into the condo. But then the apartment would look like it sold for $1 million, let's say, and it didn't bring down the value of all the other apartments in the building. It's really just to protect all the other condo owners for the value of their apartment. Now, another big difference between condos and co-ops is going to be the pricing differences, which I know is something that is probably very important to you if you are thinking about buying. Because a condo has much more flexibility and the ease of transfer, the ease of use, how you can take ownership, it's generally going to command an extra 15 to 20% more than a co-op would generally cost. Now, also with a condo, you have additional closing costs such as title insurance, and then if you are going to be financing the purchase, you will have a mortgage recording tax as well, which you will not have in a co-op. Now, when you are thinking about purchasing either a condo or a co-op, another key difference to keep in mind is subletting. With condos, they offer a much broader right to sublet. This is why they really appeal to international buyers, pied-à-terre buyers, investment buyers, because immediately upon taking ownership, you can rent out the apartment. Now, some co-ops will allow you to sublet the apartment, but generally they will want to see that you have been in the apartment for at least 2 to 3 years first before you decide to sublet. And then a lot of times, once they do allow you to finally sublet the apartment, it may only be for about 2 years out of every 5 years. And a big majority of co-ops don't allow subletting at all. So it's good to just keep that in mind. The next key difference to keep in mind is going to be down payments. Co-ops are going to require a much larger down payment most of the time. Generally across the board, you're going to see between 20 to 30% down is what they would be looking for. However, you will see some co-ops across the city that will require 40% down, that may require 50% down. You will see the 50% down a lot, especially on the Upper East Side along Park Avenue and Fifth Avenue. And then some of the co-ops up here even require all cash purchases only, which is crazy to think about, but they really want to see an owner's equity. Condos are going to be much different though. They will really take whatever you can put down, as long as you obviously can get approval from the bank to get the loan. But generally, I will see most of the time that they want to see no more than 90% financed. Now, one of the last main differences between the two is going to be the monthly fees. Co-op fees are generally lumped into one fee, which we call maintenance. However, with a condo, there are going to be two separate fees. It's going to be basically the maintenance split in two, because you're going to have a separate real estate tax bill, and then you're going to have your monthly charges from the building. But if you were to put those two together in a co-op, that would be your maintenance. So that's an easy way to look at it. And there's really no general rule as to whether or not a condo's monthlies are going to be any cheaper or more expensive than a co-op's monthlies. It really just comes down to the building itself. And then one thing to keep in mind when you are beginning your search, especially when it comes to inventory, here in New York City, there are way more co-ops than there are condos. In fact, city estimates suggest there are twice as many co-ops than condos in NYC. The discrepancy can largely be attributed to the so-called co-op conversion boom of the 1980s, when developers converted an enormous number of rental buildings into co-ops. Okay, so now that we have gone over all the key differences between a condo and a co-op, you may be asking, okay, Ashton, well, which one should I choose if I'm looking to purchase an apartment in New York City? And really, you just need to consider two crucial questions. Do you prefer ownership in your name, or do you prefer to purchase it through an entity or a trust? And two, how do you plan to use the apartment? Do you plan to use it full-time as your primary residence, or do you plan to maybe have it as part of your rental portfolio in the future? If you don't mind taking it in your personal name, if you plan on using it as your primary home for the foreseeable future, and you plan to never be a New York City landlord, then why not pay less and get more? At the end of the day, it really just comes down to what your goals are and what your plans are moving forward. So that's why it's good to have a conversation with a real estate agent to really walk you through their process and help you determine which makes most sense for you and your situation. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, please give it a thumbs up if you did. I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. Please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions about buying or selling in New York City, and I will see you guys in the next one.